Hello, I'm Sarah Gowler, the Assistant Professor and Program Coordinator for Early Childhood Education at Kankakee Community College. So today we're going to think about language development and some interesting facts and kind of this process that children go through as they develop their language. Did you know that by 18 weeks in utero, the children start to discriminate sounds? And by 25 weeks in utero, that they start to be able to recognize different people's voices or familiar songs that they've heard often. When a baby is born, they don't have a lot of means of communication, but it's important to understand that an infant's cries will communicate their different needs. Whether it's they're hungry, they're uncomfortable, they're hot, they're cold, they're wet, they may need some physical comfort, or they may be sleepy. So these different cries as a child gets older will start to sound differently. And so generally, if you listen really closely, you'll start to know what a child needs by the way that they cry without really trying too hard. So as those cries kind of go along and the parents are responsive to their child, we'll see that other forms of communication will start to develop. By 2 months of age, some children can smile and even start to begin to laugh. This is another important milestone in this language development because it encourages that social interaction with their parents or caregivers. Around this time also, we'll see infants start to make different coos and different sounds. Parents can encourage this development by imitating these sounds back to the child, and you'll see that even at these young ages that infants and parents can have this give and take relationship with communication. This is their first beginning to understand that communication takes turns. As the child goes along, you'll see they'll start to be able to babble and string these sounds together. By 5 or 6 months, you'll see that some children can start to string different sounds together to get their parents or caregivers' attention. By 7 to 12 months, we'll see that children will have their first words. And this is important because as the child's brain and body continues to develop, they'll start to be able to imitate more words and sounds that their caregivers make. Children by 12 months will say their first word, and you'll see that these first words are often mama, dada, or in the case of my child, he said dog first. And so it's important to communicate and talk with your child because you are one of the biggest influencing factors in their language development. You'll see that by 12 months, infants can also listen to commands and may be able to follow different commands, such as where's your book? Where are your shoes? Let's get a drink. And it's important that by following those commands, children are developing their receptive language, or their ability to listen to spoken word and process it. Young toddlers have a larger receptive vocabulary than they do an expressive or spoken vocabulary. So it's important to remember that there's also that side of language development because toddlers can understand and know so many more words than they can actually speak. You may have even heard of infant sign language, and by 12 months, children are able to point and gesture. This is also a time that you can introduce sign language. Many children may pick up things like more or please when they want something. And so having children learn sign language is beneficial to their language development. By 18 to 24 months, we see an explosion of language. And this word spurt has to do with their developing brain. And so as the brain develops and is able to hold more information or is exposed to more ideas, we see that language explodes. Toddlers will want to say everything and imitate lots of different words. You may see that they still are kind of figuring out how to pronounce words, and that's okay. Some development with language and some letter sounds take all the way through the age of 8. We expect toddlers to make mistakes, and they also will want to do the same thing over and over and over again. So your toddler may want to sing the same songs over and over and over again, or read the same books 100 times a day. And this is part of the process. As they hear the different words over and over, their brain is trying to make sense of that, and you'll see that they'll start to say those words as well. This is why the song Baby Shark is so popular with toddlers. They want to do it over and over, and it's the same words for the whole song. As they move into the second year of life, you're going to see that they'll have more practice with language, and they'll start to say some words in more of an adult-like way. But you'll still see that they're going to make some mistakes, such as adding ed or s to different words, saying I goed there. But it's also a great time because children will start to put words together to form short sentences. So when your toddler comes to you and says, Daddy, go, we know that that means that the toddler's asking, did Dad go to work, or where did Dad go? This is called telegraphic speech. It's important that we help children and support them through this process. As they put those words together, we can say that as well and expand the sentence. So if the child told me, Daddy, go, I would expand that a sentence to say, well, Dad went to work. He'll be back later. This expansion helps child to understand that those sentences get longer, and as they move into an older preschooler in 3 or 4, you'll see that they'll also do these same ideas. Anyone who has a 2-year-old can tell you that 2-year-olds have found their own independence. With this independence, you'll also see that their language will follow along with their thoughts and ideas. It's very common for a 2-year-old to want to disagree with a caregiver or maybe say no. Please understand that this is part of the process, and their newfound independence and ability to communicate their wants and needs is also an important milestone in this process. Giving them their time to voice their own opinion is important to help them understand that they have their own thoughts and ideas. As we move into the 3rd and 4th year of life, we're going to see that their brain is going to continue to develop, and they'll be able to express themselves more clearly and maybe with some additional words. And so with that development, we also have to think about that young children generally see things from their own perspective or their own ideas. We call this egocentrism, and it happens in young children because their body and their brain is used to the experience that they see. And so much of their language will be self-directed or self-perspective. And so they will tell you about things that they've done, and they will be interested in talking about themselves or what's happening in the world around them. So young children lack the ability to think about things beyond what they've experienced. You'll also see that children's experiences and their vocabulary development will be based around the activities and things happening in their environment. If you take a child to the zoo, they will learn all sorts of different animals' names because that's what they're seeing in front of them. It's much easier for children to learn vocab when they're able to experience it right there. We want to make sure that as children are learning different words, that we involve them in this process. Imagine someone trying to tell you what jump means versus having a child jump around the room saying jump, jump, jump. So this is what we want to think about. It's a very active process when we develop language, and it happens within the context of that child's environment. Also, in the 3rd and 4th year of life, we'll see that children will start to understand different grammar rules and start to make less mistakes with adding ed to the end or s, or start to learn that it's one mouse and a group of mice. So you will see those different developmental milestones happen. As your child talks to you, you don't necessarily have to stop them and correct what they say. You can always use a reflection back to them. So if a child says, did you see those gooses? You can say, yes, I saw the geese at the pond. And so children will learn those different rules just by listening to you. Again, we grow up in a village and we listen to other people talk, and that's ultimately the different rules and the language that we will learn, or that children will learn. Preschool age children will also want to ask lots of different questions and know why. Why? It's important that we don't get flustered by this situation because really it has to do with their brain development. As their brain is growing and their cognitive areas are expanding, they want to know about how the world works and why things are the way they are. So helping children to understand that they can also think about these things. So when a child asks you why, you can also kind of put it back to them and say, why do you think that is? This is really helpful because this is going to develop a child's critical thinking skills and have them consider why they think that could be that way, such as, why do the leaves fall off of trees? Have them think about it and try to come up with an answer, and then you can support their answer or encourage them to figure out how to investigate it. Maybe you go to the library and find a book about fall and why leaves fall off of the tree. And this can help grow your child's vocabulary and answer those why questions without them always relying on you to give them the answer. One of the other things that we're going to see as children's language develops is that they will start to become more active with speaking during play. You'll see that the older 4-year-old child will be able to get into a different play theme and play with other people and use their spoken language in order to maybe create different roles. Oftentimes we see children imitate playing moms and dads and babies because this is what they see in their life. So children's play will reflect what they see in their life or things, different themes that are happening. And so it's important to remember that play is a great vehicle for language development because they learn how to negotiate with others, they learn how to take turns. They also learn a lot of different skills as far as their voice. Being able to make different voices during their playtime is an important skill to learn how to push air through your vocal cords or to make those high sounds or low sounds. One example of this is the story of the 3 little bears. We have our big Papa Bear, our Mama Bear, and our wee baby bear. And so helping children understand that they can take on these different roles and make these different sounds with their voices, it will continue to develop their language and also practice those different sounds that they may make. Especially if you have a child who has a hard time getting a lot of air behind their voice to project their voice and be louder. These type of play activities will help that child. We also have to think about that around 4 or 5 is when a child first starts to develop their inner speech. Young children do not talk in their heads like we do as adults, and it just starts to develop at 4 or 5. So the 3-year-old or the 2-year-old, you'll see that they talk out loud to kind of give themselves different prompts. 4 or 5 is when that will slowly start to move to an internal voice, but it's still developing. The young child's internal voice is not really developed well until closer to 7. And so this is when we'll start to see that children will think in their head, and they may also mouth or talk out loud. This is why doing things out loud with young children is very important. Also at this time that this inner voice and different developmental milestones are happening, we'll see that children will start to become more aware of print in their environment. And so this is part of language development where children will start to understand that our spoken words can also be represented in print words. And so many times a child's first words that they read may actually be logos. Most children can tell you what the McDonald's logo looks like, or Pizza Hut, or maybe even their favorite restaurant. It's important to look at all of these different environmental print in your everyday life and encourage children to be aware of it and maybe even find different words or letters that they know. This is going to give way into a child maybe being more interested in letters, and typically the first word they want to know how to spell is their own name. So it's a great place to start is with their name and the letters in their name and why it's important. The more that you can tie that relationship of spoken language to written language, the more meaningful it will be to the child and the more they will want to learn. Remember when we talked about children are egocentric? Well, let's use it to our advantage to help them learn. So generally, their name or the name of people around them or their best friend is the name and the letters that they will learn first. As the child's brain continues to grow and flourish, we're going to see that they'll be able to do more complex skills, such as telling a story or singing a song or creating a whole play theme. And this is how we're going to see that that child, by the age of 5, is going to develop a spoken vocabulary of around 2,000 words. We also know that with that receptive language, or words that they understand, that will always and generally be larger than what a child can speak. It's important with all of this developmental information to understand that differences are going to happen as we go through this process of language development. When we think about language development, there may be some physical differences in children, because when we think about the small muscles of our mouth, they do have to develop over time. And so young infants, they have a harder time making different sounds with their lips, and older children will be able to do those. With some children, they may have low muscle tone in their mouth or their tongue, and this is where speech therapy can help a child develop those muscles. We may also see something like a tongue tie that would inhibit a child's ability to speak, but maybe they still have the receptive language or they know some sign language. Also, if a child has frequent ear infections as a young infant or toddler, we'll see that that can ultimately delay their language a little bit, because we do rely on hearing language in order to be able to speak it. So if you have any of those concerns, it's important to talk to your doctor. That way they can help you through that process. Also, bilingual children by the age of 7 actually outperform their other children who only speak one language. So we may see a small delay around 18 months to 2 years for children who are bilingual, but by the time they get into school in 1st and 2nd grade, we see that they are on average with their peers or above. So it's important to think about this process that your child goes through, from cooing to babbling, to saying words and putting words together, to asking you questions about why. This is the process that we want to make sure that children are going through, and if at any time in the point of this process that you have a concern about your child, make sure to talk to their doctor or seek out help from your local school district or early intervention. But ultimately, please understand that you are the greatest influence on your child's vocabulary and language development. The more that you talk to them, from starting in utero through those preschool years, is going to help them develop those language skills that they need for later in school.